Greetings all, Ferrari 601 here. This week, amid much celebration and heraldry, Kunos have released the Ferrari 70th Anniversary Special Edition DLC pack for Assetto Corsa. The centerpiece of this pack undoubtedly has to be the Ferrari SF70H. This, for the first time in sim racing history, is a current spec 2017 Works Ferrari Formula One car. For the first time ever, we have a really high-fidelity PC racing sim giving us a current spec Formula One car while the Formula One season is in progress. And there it is, the SF70H. It is an absolutely mind-blowing piece of technology. It's a mind-blowing piece of automotive engineering, and in Formula One, it is a very competitive package overall. The SF70H, therefore, the history of this car is still being written as we speak. The season is not yet over. We have 6 races to go as of the time of this recording. Therefore, the entire story of this car is still being written, and the parts that have already been written, the ink is still wet on the pages. However, be that as it may, here it is for all of us to play with, the Ferrari SF70H Formula One car. Amazing. As far as we know about the SF70H, here are the specifications as well as the current competition history, which will not be current in a few days. However, it is, of course, a Formula One car designed by Scuderia Ferrari for the 2017 Formula One World Championship. 2017 saw the introduction of really groundbreaking regulations to completely overhaul the aerodynamic profile of these cars to make them faster around the corners as well as to make them look a whole lot better than they have done in previous years, really since 2009, with the very tall, narrow rear wings and the very low and wide front wings. All of that is gone, and we now have a much more aesthetically pleasing aerodynamic package. The SF70H, of course, designed by Ferrari for Formula One, the design team led by technical director Mattia Binotto, Simone Resta as chief designer, and Enrico Cardile as chief aerodynamicist. The chassis, of course, as we have come to expect in Formula One nowadays, it is a carbon fiber monocoque with a honeycomb composite structure there, a single shell construction. That is the definition of the word monocoque. It's a single shell. The entire chassis is one piece, of course, all of layered carbon fiber cloth impregnated with resin and baked in autoclaves for who knows how many thousands of hours. The wheelbase on the car is 3,760 meters, or 148 inches exactly, and of course it is powered by the ubiquitous 1.6-liter turbo hybrid power plant that all Formula One teams are using per the regulations. The engine in this car is the Ferrari Type 062. It's a 1.6-liter V6 with direct fuel injection, single turbocharge of course, limited to 15,000 RPM per the regulations. However, in practice, most teams do not really rev their engines much higher than about 12,000 RPM. Such are the flow rates for the fuel. You're not allowed to burn more than 100 kilograms of fuel for the entire duration of the Grand Prix, and of course the turbocharger and all of the hybrid electronic systems really supplement that engine power, thus pretty much negating the need to rev the engine much beyond 11.8 or 12,000 RPM. The transmission is an 8-speed semi-automatic, paddle shift change of course on the back of the steering wheel, plus 1 reverse gear, yes. The hybrid powertrains on these cars are real spaceship type stuff. It is the state of the art in hybrid technology. We have an energy recovery system that harvests energy off of the rear axle under braking, as well as another energy recovery system that harvests energy from the turbocharger as exhaust heat that would normally just be wasted out the back of the car. Mercedes, they have what is considered to be the best package on the grid at the moment in terms of their engine design as well as their chassis design. However, Mercedes very recently announced that in a dyno test, they were able to achieve over 50% thermal efficiency on their Formula One V6 turbo hybrid engine. That's the first time ever that any internal combustion has achieved any sort of performance figure anywhere close, really, to 50% thermal efficiency. Most internal combustion engines today, even the most state-of-the-art road engines, they're approaching 35% thermal efficiency. So now, Mercedes, and I have to believe that Ferrari are not too far behind on this front, are extracting 50% at least of all of the potential chemical energy in a single drop of fuel and using that energy for the explicit purpose of propelling the car. It's not being wasted in heat, it's not being wasted as sound, it's not being wasted as vibration. 50% of that energy at least going toward propulsive force. That is an absolutely astronomical achievement in the history of automotive engineering, and it's all been spurred on by Formula One. The fuel and lubricants in this car, of course, developed by Shell under their V-Power moniker. Of course, Formula One cars nowadays, they are running what is essentially petrol, gasoline, that is designed to be put in any road car. Gone are the days of the mid-'80s and the first turbo era when they were injecting all sorts of really exotic fuels into those engines to give us that 1,500 horsepower power figure that they were achieving in qualifying at least. But now, these cars are running essentially on pump fuel. And yes, these cars actually could run on pump fuel straight from your local gas station. Really, really cool. Of course, the car rides on these Pirelli P0 tires per the regulations. The Pirelli Cinturato brand also running on these cars in the wet conditions, in the intermediate and full wet compounds. Really, really cool technology on this car, and I've got to say, Kunos have done a really good job with the modeling. Just have a look at it. The competition history, of course, as we have mentioned, is still being written. However, the car made its race debut at the 2017 Australian Grand Prix, which it also managed to win in the hands of Sebastian Vettel. Thus far in 2017, the car has entered into 14 races. It has won 4 of them. It's taken podium positions in 14 of them. It has scored pole position for 4 of them and has scored fastest lap in 4 of them. Of course, all of those statistics are still being written, and of course, that will all conclude at the end of the 2017 Formula One season. The car is driven this year by Sebastian Vettel and Kimi Räikkönen. Really awesome drivers, both of those guys. Kimi just signed another deal to stay at Ferrari through 2018 at very least, so good to see the Kimster remaining in Formula One. The Kimster also still has the distinction of being Ferrari's most recent drivers' champion. The 2017 season has certainly seen a change in fortune for Ferrari. Ferrari have struggled tremendously, really since the start of 2009 with those aero changes, but since 2014, when Formula One made that change to the turbo hybrid powertrain, Ferrari really have not been industry leaders. 2017, it is seeing a change in fortunes. They are trying to fight for the championship. Will they fight for the championship? After that display in Singapore, who knows what's going to happen, but it is still technically to play for, even at this stage in the Formula One season. Enough about the car's competition history, enough about the drivers, enough about the specs. What have we got going on this Kunos rendition of the SF70H? Well, getting in close here, we have got ourselves utter resplendence in every sense of the imagination. Look at the quality of this modeling. Look at the detail in there. Just have a look at that front wing. How many elements are on this front wing? In terms of main plane elements, let's stop the spinning here for a moment and let's do some counting. The main plane of the wing, 2 elements. Then the flap elements, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 principal flap elements. There are, let's see, there's another 1 flap element behind that, so bring that up to 5. And then the outboard elements, we have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 individual wing elements on the front wing per side, and that's just the frontal side of the wing. The external sides of the wing, in other words, the planes here on the side of the wing, the end fences, that's the word I'm looking for. You can see that there are a further 3 elements there on the end fences. Absolutely incredible level of detail here that Kunos have managed to squeeze in there. And it's even more incredible to consider that Ferrari have designed this wing and they've produced it in real life. Unbelievable. Getting in real close here, you can see there is the nose section of the car. Just below the Italian flag banner there with the Ferrari logo, you can see these 2 little holes in the nose section, the very tip of the nose. Not entirely sure what those are for. They're not big enough to be for cockpit cooling, that's for sure. I have to wonder if there are some sensors behind there just trying to pick up the car's attitude, airspeed, things like that. Really, really amazing detail. Looking toward the midsection of the front end, you can see that we have some forward and lower barge board detail going on, twin element barge boards there underneath the front suspension pickup points, just below the lower wishbones there. You can see them in black. And then, of course, on the sides of the nose, you have the camber mounts there. They're blank for the moment. However, the FIA, at their discretion, can give Ferrari a camera to place in those canards there, and then you'd have a really cool onboard shot. Very, very cool. Front suspension layout, you can see double wishbone push rod. This is ubiquitous up and down the Formula One grid in 2017. And you can also see there the big brake duct detail on this car. Absolutely awesome, awesome detail. Also, you can see in those brake ducts, have a look here on the right-hand side of the car, our left, you can see that there are some strakes there inside the intake surface of the brake duct there. Really, really cool detail. I also love that carbon effect on the suspension. Of course, these are carbon suspensions. You can see that carbon weave in the suspension elements. Absolutely fantastic. Top side of the car, we've got 3 sets of canard wings here, very reminiscent of what Ferrari were doing on the F2007 and the F2008 in the last couple of years of the old aerospec formula there before we went crazy in 2009. You can see these 3 elements. They're all in red, so they don't particularly stand out aside from the rest of the monocoque, but you can see those 3 elements there. Very, very cool. Great attention to detail here from Kunos. Toward the midsection of the front end, looking from a profile view, you can see the principal barge boards, very sophisticated, very complex. We have got so many complex geometries happening in this section, and of course it's all to sculpt that air around the flanks of the car, moving rearward to deal with those flow dynamics around the diffuser. Additionally, you can see this, I guess we can call it a lateral barge board on the outer side of the car, extending out from the front of the side pod here. You can see this big panel that Ferrari debuted. Red Bull have since copied it. Really, really cool. And you can see the complex geometries in that as well. There are some louvers, some ducts, some vent holes cut into that just to help some overpressure dynamics from that air. Above that, you can see another element of a barge board or turning vane. I'm not entirely sure what you call this part of the car, but you can see that Singha decal on it there. Really, really cool aerodynamic detail. Another very cool detail on this car, the radiator inlets. Have a look at those. They are so small and so nicely sculpted. Ferrari are going for these small and high-mounted radiator inlets to try and minimize drag, and of course you can't blame them. But just look at the attention to detail in there, what they were able to do with that radiator inlet, and Kunos, of course, copying it resplendently. Wonderful. Additionally, on the Ferrari, we've got these 2 additional holes for feeding the radiator inlets and probably to cool some other systems for that hybrid battery pack, which would also be mounted in this section of the car. Awesome. On the top side there, have a look. Definitely utilizing some Kawanda aerodynamic principles there to get the flow to attach itself to the leading edge of the side pod and then go down into that side pod. Unbelievable, really cool solution. Ferrari did a lot of research, definitely, a lot of wind tunnel work, a lot of CFD work. The top side rear of the car, yes, we're looking into the cockpit, but also just a rears and to the sides of the cockpit, you can see these louvers, these black louvers. They're black in bare carbon. That is some venting, undoubtedly for the fuel tank area and for that battery pack. You got to keep those things really, really cool because they run at very specific temperatures, and the batteries in particular, you've got to make sure that you keep them within their operating temperature range. Otherwise, you get a fire, and that is no good. So keep things cool with those big louvers. Really awesome detail. Now, moving down to the floor, you can see this is something that we noted all the way back in February when we started to see the real-world F1 cars for 2017. You can see the floor geometry. Going along the side of the side pod here, you can see the floor is relatively flat. It curves down slightly, but toward the leading edge of the floor, you can see that it very suddenly and very abruptly folds up to pretty much 90 degrees adjacent to the other surface of the floor there that is facing basically perpendicular to the ground. You can see that you've got this lip on the side. I have to believe that this is to control the airflow around the bottom of the monocoque and to start routing that air around the rear section of the car so you can use your mind's eye to see how that air is going to flow from front to rear. Additionally, on the rear, you can see all of that space on the floor. That's just open space that the air is funneling into to feed that diffuser. Awesome, awesome, awesome aerodynamic stuff. On the rear of the car, here comes the money shot. Oh yeah, look at that. Look at that. You've got these, they're not ducts, they're part of the brake duct, but they really are little winglets. They're adding downforce directly onto the wheels there. That is absolutely fantastic. You can see these multi-element winglets here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Are there 6? There might be 6 elements there on those winglets alone. Unbelievable amount of detail, unbelievable amount of work too. Moving down here, we can see the diffuser. The diffuser, initially you might be tempted to call it a single level diffuser because you can see that you have 2 outboard tunnels and then you've got that center section that comes down with that legality plank on the bottom of the car. But have a look through here. These upper layers of the diffuser, look at that. There are 3 distinct levels of this diffuser in addition to the main section at the very bottom of the car. 1, 2, 3 separate layers of carbon coming underneath there that the air is being squeezed through at high pressure to add more downforce to the rear end. This thing is like a spaceship, absolutely. Here's the rear wing. You can see the rear wing end fences here that all the teams have been using this geometry, coming down straight and then turning in at about 45 degrees before going down straight again for the final time. You can also see the very complicated geometries on the end fences with all of these gills and louvers cut into those rear wing end plates. Really fantastic. Of course, the back of the car, we've got the rear crash structure integrated with the rain light. We have a monkey seat winglet just below the main rear wing, and then we've got our exhaust. Big center exhaust coming out of the single turbine, and then you've got 2 outlet pipes for the turbo wastegates. Really cool looking solution, I've got to say. Kunos very, very cheekily here. We can see the gearbox casing in carbon, but then we really can't see anything else underneath that bodywork, even though the rear end of this car is wide open, as you can see. Ferrari, of course, being very secretive about their engine design and the placement of everything in terms of precisely where things are in the car. So I'm sure Kunos saw some things under there, but they don't want to show us, so they just very conveniently fade to black, but it looks appropriate anyway, so I'll give them a pass. Also, I want to notice the rear suspension. Look at that. Pull rod on the rear. Double wishbone pull rod. Really cool geometries there. That's also ubiquitous on all of these 2017 Formula 1 cars. Looking around the other side, sort of in half shadow, look at those reflections across the bodywork there. I can't really find a single flat surface on this car apart from the shark fin, obviously, that's integrated with the engine cover, and the T-wing. A lot of people also, as a tangent, they've been very critical of those T-wings. I like them. I think they look cool. And additionally, they're adding downforce to the car. Anything that adds more downforce to these cars and makes them go faster through the corners, I like. So keep the T-wings. Also, keep the shark fins. Anyway, though, just looking at this thing here in showroom view is an experience and a half. And then when you remember that it's a current spec 2017 works Ferrari, it gets even more spectacular. However, the most spectacular part of this car for me, it's the cockpit. Let's go in. Yes, yes, yes. The beast is so inviting as we fly in here. Here is the cockpit view. We're sitting slightly, ever so slightly low. We'll be a little bit higher when we drive the car, but you can see here, it's mind-boggling in here. Look at this steering wheel. I don't know whether to call this a steering wheel or to call it, I don't know, a flight control device, because we've got ourselves so many different controls, so many different settings, so many different parameters that we can monitor and adjust with this steering wheel. It is unbelievably complex. I haven't bothered to count how many buttons and switches and dials and things there are on this thing because it's just immense, absolutely immense, but it also shows you a lot of information. You're going to see speed, lap time, fuel level, gear position indicator, all that stuff, but you're also going to see the temperature of the batteries. You're going to see how much battery charge you've got left. You're going to see how much battery charge you've got left for a given lap. You're going to see lap delta, all of that stuff. It's on the steering wheel, so there are so many parameters to get your head wrapped around in this car. Additionally, I mentioned the battery charge, discharge, all of those states. Well, you've also got free reign over all of the different charge and discharge settings for your harvest rates and your discharge rates on your MGU-K and your MGU-H. You can change the mode of the MGU-H from motor to battery. In other words, put energy into the battery or put power into the turbocharger or to the crankshaft on the engine. It's just immense. There is so much to learn in a car like this. This is not unprecedented in Assetto Corsa. They also gave us a year ago the SF15T, the 2015 Ferrari car, which was also pretty cool. However, this one really brings all of that to fruition. There are different settings for the charge and discharge rates. You can, of course, adjust your harvest rates on the rear axle under braking. It affects the balance of the car under braking. There's just so much to wrap your head around here, but we'll get into that when we drive the car. Just here in the cockpit, additionally to that steering wheel detail, you've got great detail in the cockpit. You can see the weave of the monocoque through here, all that honeycomb composite structure. It's awesome, and it's not just bare black either. First of all, everything has a very nice gray finish on it, but beyond that, look at the complex geometries here on the upper side of the bulkhead. It's not just a straight barrier like it is in the older cars. This one, you can see how the crash structure has been refined now in 2017. The cockpit almost is embracing the driver here. It's so sculpted, it's so refined, it's so cool. Of course, additionally, you have the the Ferrari chassis plate there. I can't quite read it. We can't quite get close enough, but I am led to believe it is legible. And then on the other side, we have a track map of Monza. So I wonder when this final photo was taken for this pack. Did Assetto Corsa continue to model this car all the way up as recently as the Italian Grand Prix? Just to give you some context here, I'm making this recording on the 21st of September. The Singapore Grand Prix was this Sunday past. The Italian Grand Prix was only 2 weeks before that. So did Kunos take their final pictures of this car and do their final modeling work during the Italian Grand Prix weekend? If so, that is an incredible rate of speed to get this thing ready for release as DLC, which they finally did on the 19th of September. Unbelievable job, guys. Absolutely unbelievable. Back to the controls in the cockpit. There's nothing at all on the right side, but on the left we've got some switches and dials here. Looks like we've got some dials here which might be different start maps. I think that decal says start, then again I could be wrong. I'm looking at the lower dial there on the left hand side of the bulkhead, the only one we can see in its entirety. And then below that and slightly arrears we have, looks like we have the supplementary oil pump there to feed oil into the engine as it burns oil through the race. We've got the master ignition kill. Looks like we've got a fire extinguisher button as well. Absolutely unbelievable work. Looking down here at the seat, we've got the seat molded in carbon. You can see the cushions there for the driver's shoulders and the back sides of his upper arms. And then you've got the seat belts. You can see the weave of the fabric of the seat belts. You can see the logos there. Everything is fantastic. The center hub where everything buckles into. Unbelievable work. The cockpits around here where the helmet would bounce up against. You can see the Twitter handle at Scuderia Ferrari. Absolutely great, 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 great. There's the headrest, and then looking up at the snorkel, you can see the traditional T-wing on top as well as that side T-wing. Of course, these are camera mounts, and they've got the camera lenses in them. Great job, great job, great job. It's so great. I can't get over how great this is. It's a current spec works Ferrari in Assetto Corsa. They've done it right. Yes, they have. It's great. Anyway, let's leave the cockpit before I have some sort of conniption. And we'll take one final look at the car before we take it out on track and we really go into the nuts and bolts of how to get your head around these hybrid systems and all that stuff, because it's intense. It really is intense. But at the same time, I'm finding this car to be really, really, really rewarding. You got to work hard at it in terms of the setup. We'll talk about that. You got to work hard in terms of learning all the systems, but it's so much fun. It is so much fun to drive. I guess I won't leave you waiting any longer. We're going to take this car out to my favorite circuit here. It's got to be an Italian circuit for this car. Unfortunately, we don't get to see it in Formula 1 anymore, but we're going to take this car to Imola and we're going to thrash it around like nobody's business. We're also going to talk about all the hybrid systems. We're going to demonstrate how changing that harvest rate on the rear end changes the balance of the car under braking and all that stuff. So it's going to be an extended talk and drive segment of this video, but I think it's warranted for a car like this. We'll see you at Imola next. Welcome to Imola. Before we get out on track, of course, we are going to have a look through the setup screen and show you what's going on here with this absolutely glorious SF70H 2017 Works Ferrari. I have to say, us in sim racing today, we have such a privilege to be able to sit here in 2017 and drive the Works Ferrari during the season in progress. That's absolutely unbelievable what Kunos have been able to give to us. Anyway, here on the gear display, the first order of business on the setup screen, and you can see that we have fixed gearing. These 2017 Formula 1 cars, the gear ratios are fixed. The teams have to select their ratios from the start of the season, and then they are stuck with them forevermore for the duration of the championship. So they tried to split the difference between the different types of circuits that Formula 1 will visit over the course of its race calendar. They obviously go to some places with some long straights and high speeds. They also go to some places that are very twisty and tight, so they try to split the difference with the range of the 8 speeds that they've got in the gearbox. You can also see here that we've got some really high speeds theoretically attainable here, at least in terms of straight line speed. We're already exceeding 200 miles an hour in 6th gear, topping out all the way at 253 miles an hour at the top end of 8th gear. We have to remember, though, that those speeds are calculated based off of a 15,000 RPM red line on this engine. In practice, as we discussed in showroom view, these teams, however, are not revving these engines to 15,000 RPM. They're revving to about 12.1, 12.2 at the ultra high end of the range. So obviously your top speeds are going to be diminished somewhat. Additionally, that 15,000 RPM red line and these ultimate top speeds that you can see calculated, that's also assuming no air resistance, no rolling resistance from the tires on the road. Basically, it's assuming the car is running in a perfect vacuum with no friction. So these speeds not really attainable even if you were to completely trim out those wings. So in practice, top end speed on this car at Monza, or the end of the Kemmel Straight at Spa, about 340 kph, so that's about 210 miles per hour, give or take. Tires here, the default setup brings us up to the super soft straightaway. The full range of the Formula One dry weather compounds are available to choose from in this car. Of course, the wet weather compounds not available because it has yet to rain here in Assetto Corsa. It's always a beautiful sunny day. You can see the ultra softs are available, the super softs as we have seen, the softs, the mediums, and the hards. We'll run on super softs here for our first run. The pressures on all four corners, you can see the default value is 17 psi. You can go all the way down to 6 if you so choose, or all the way up to 28, so you've got quite a large pressure range to play with there. Fuel, the default fuel level is 55 liters, which is actually quite a lot. The car is rather economical, surprisingly enough. We've turned it off here to keep the engine quiet here in the pit lane. However, the maximum capacity is 133 liters, so definitely plan accordingly in terms of your fuel consumption rates. Electronics, here is where we start to play with some really complicated settings here. Default values are shown. The car has an MGU-K, which is a motor generator unit kinetic, which means that that is working with the momentum of the rear axle to harvest energy that would normally be wasted as the car is decelerated. That harvests energy from the rear axle under braking and then transfers that energy into a battery store to be used later on in the lap. This MGU-K has a menagerie of settings here. The default is balanced low, however, we can turn it off. In other words, we turn it into a charging system rather than a discharge propulsive system. In addition to balanced low, we have balanced high, overtake, top speed, and hot lap. Hot lap is going to be full beans all the time. The moment that you're no longer traction limited, that system kicks in, and then you've got about 1,000 horsepower from the internal combustion engine and the hybrid systems combined. Default to balance low, we'll switch it to charging here. The MGU-K recovery, this controls the harvest rate. By harvest rate, I mean the amount of effort that the MGU-K exerts as a generator on the rear axle under braking. That force nets to a braking force onto the rear axle. So the higher up you go in this percentage, you can ramp it all the way up to 100 or all the way down to 0, basically to turn the system off entirely, the more force that you're going to be getting as a net braking force on the rear axle. This starts to play as you go higher up with those recovery rates in terms of how much energy you want to harvest relative to how much energy is going into the axles via the normal hydraulic brakes on the car. The disc brakes, of course, those carbon-carbon brakes with those 6 and 8 piston calipers. It's an insane system, but you have a net braking force on the rear which is multiplied relative to whatever the recovery rate is, and that is going to wreak havoc with your conventional brake balance settings as you play with that harvest rate. So you've got to be very in tune with what you're doing with the settings on both the conventional hydraulic braking system that you control with the brake pedal, as well as what you're doing with the MGU-K recovery rates. The MGU-H, that's the second hybrid system on this car. The MGU-H is connected to the turbocharger, and what it does is it uses the momentum of the impeller in the turbocharger, the turbine section of that turbocharger, to harvest energy that would normally just be wasted as pure momentum in the turbocharger and as heat in the turbocharger. What the turbocharger is able to do is drive that motor generator unit as a generator, and that is then able to inject energy into the battery bank underneath the fuel cell in the middle of the car just behind the cockpit, or it's able to turn that energy around immediately and inject it directly into the engine. The MGU-H motor generator unit is connected to the engine via the timing gears. So it's connected directly up to the turbine section on the turbocharger, and then through a gear train, it's connected to the timing gears on one of the camshafts of the engine. What that's able to do is inject momentum into the engine to help it pick up revs. Additionally, what this can do is spool up the turbocharger preemptively before you even get on the throttle fully, and it effectively negates turbo lag. There is basically zero turbo lag in this car, even though it is just a single turbocharger car. It's a single stage compressor there. So the hybrid system works in two fundamental ways. It harvests off of the rear axle. It also sends propulsive force to the rear axle. That's the MGU-K. The MGU-H harvests off of the turbocharger, and that's able to charge the battery or to send that energy directly back into the engine to spool up that crankshaft effectively, and then also to spool up the turbocharger. So you're negating turbo lag, and you're also giving the car a power boost simultaneously. You can adjust what the MGU-H does in terms of how it uses that energy from the turbocharger. You can send the energy to the battery pack and not send it into the engine, so this will charge the battery even when you're at full throttle going in a straight line. Or you can send it into the engine, and that's to speed the engine up and also to speed up the turbocharger a bit. The engine braking map, it's a conventional engine brake system there. However, this is somewhat critical in terms of what you're doing with the MGU-H mode. So in other words, how much do you want effectively the throttles to hang open off throttle and basically give the engine a chance to compress air and contribute more to the engine braking force. You've got to play with that as well, and obviously depending on how you use the throttle, how you use the brakes, how late you brake, how early you get back on the throttle in the corner, that's going to affect what you want to do with your settings there. Aero, this is much more conventional. You have two adjustments on the front wing. You can adjust the left and right hand flaps on the front wing independently, and you have a single adjustment here on the rear wing. Default values are shown. Alignment settings, camber and tow, this is all conventional now, all four corners as you can see. Dampers, your fast and slow bound and rebound settings on all four corners here. Generic, this is the brake bias. This is your conventional hydraulic braking system on the car. Defaults to 54% in the front axle. You are going to play with this a lot. I do recommend that you have some sort of button or rotary switch on your steering wheel mapped to brake bias because you will be using it in this car. Brake power defaults to 100%. So that's a one-to-one correspondence between the pedal movement and the actual action of braking the car. Heave dampers here, so this is your third spring in bound and rebound fast and slow rates. Advanced suspension settings here, you've got your packer rates and travel ranges on all four corners, and then your main suspension screen with your anti-roll bar front and rear, your wheel rates and ride heights on all four corners available as well. Pit stop strategy, ubiquitous here for all of the cars in Assetto Corsa. And that just about covers everything on this car. There's a lot to handle for sure. However, the first thing we've got to do is do our first run on default setup. We'll put the default fuel load in. You can hear the engine fires up. We'll run on the super soft tires. And now, the cockpit of this fired up works Ferrari. It is a privilege, absolutely, for all of us to be able to drive this car in the moment as the season is going on. Yeah, it's cool. So, the only additional instrumentation that we've got on the screen are the pedals there in the lower left as always. However, because the car is now alive, we can look at the instrumentation available to us on the steering wheel. Starting from the top, you can see the three green lights that are illuminated in the top left of the steering wheel. The leftmost light is the DRS availability light, so it's illuminated right now. It's telling us that DRS is available. If I want to open the DRS, now you can see that second light, second from the left, comes on. The green light there under the letter F, I'm not entirely sure what that is. It remains on no matter what's going on. Additionally, you can see a green light underneath K2 on the steering wheel. That's just a status for the KERS. It tells you that the car is running, basically. The LCD now on the steering wheel. Lots and lots and lots of information going on. In the top left of the LCD, you can see the blue number 55. That's the fuel level in liters. The green bar running in the top center section of the LCD, that is the rate of charge or discharge on your KERS system, or your ERS system, really.
available for the lap. So in other words, as you use the power, that line is going to go down, and it only increases when you cross start finish. It'll go back to full. That's the amount of power that you have available from your ERS over the course of a single lap. That will only diminish. It will not replenish until you complete that lap. The big N in the middle, obviously that is your gear position indicator, showing neutral right now. We can go up through the box, first through 8th gear, and then all the way down through the box, back into neutral and into reverse. You can see all of that there quite nicely. The 425s to the sides, top and bottom respectively, of the gear position indicator. I'm not entirely sure what those things are. I would think that they're tire pressure, but I know that tire pressure was set to 17 psi, so I'm not entirely sure what they are. And honestly, I've never quite noticed if they've changed yet. However, we'll be looking at that throughout the course of this run. To the left of that, you can see a white number 1. That is the lap counter, so we're on our first lap right now, showing the number 1. Below that, you can see a 0. That is our speed readout, the blue 0. That is in kilometers per hour. Below that, the red number showing 2950. That is the engine RPM. In the middle, you have got a big blue number 100. That is the amount of charge remaining in the car, the total ERS system, the battery store, the big battery pack under the fuel cell behind us. That is the amount of power, the state of charge, if you will, of that battery, showing 100% right now. We're fully charged up. Below that, you can see a green bar in the center. To the right, you see a red bar. To the left, you see an orange bar. That is a visual representation of the state of charge of your ERS system. The right-hand column of the steering wheel, you can see 2 hash marks there. That is the delta lap time. We have not set a lap time yet in that session, so therefore it's not giving us a time. The 1709 ticking past 1710 right now, that is the current lap time. And then below that, the blue number 74, I just believe that that is the average temperature of the battery pack, the ERS battery pack. That covers all the instrumentation on the steering wheel. You can see the flashing red and blue lights right now on either side of the LCD. That's telling us that we're in the pit lane and the speed limiter is active. However, that's what we've got going on in the cockpit. I hope you've been taking notes. Now, finally, let's punch up first gear, bring up the revs a bit, and let's drive this 2017 Works Ferrari SF70H. Very carefully pull away up to the pit lane speed limit of 80 clicks. And now on the racetrack for the first time, the tires will be freezing cold, as will be the brakes, because we were sitting in the pit lane for 18 minutes. However, coming through the Tamburello complex for the first time, obviously being very cautious because we need to find temperature. I have all of the ERS systems off at the moment, and obviously the battery is at 100%, so there's no harvesting going on really. MGUK recovery is at default 50%. I can bring it to 0 if I want, so now the system is completely inactive. Being very cautious and deliberate here on this warm-up lap. You can see the numbers to either side of that gear position indicator now. They have gone down in the front, or on the top there, to 24, and they've gone up on the bottom, or perhaps the rear, to 26. Not entirely sure what they're indicating. They're not indicating tire pressure, and they're not indicating tire temperature either, so I'm not entirely sure what to make of those numbers. I still do not know. You can see that we are down on our previous lap time by well over 1,000 seconds. Obviously, that's because our last lap was around 20 minutes in length. I think the Life L190 has even beaten us there. and now running at reasonable speeds. The tire temperatures and pressures have come up, the brake temps have come up. Now feeling confident here in this car. There's full revs on the engine. And pretty good Excel, I've got to say. We're shifting at about 11,600 RPM. Bit of rear locking there. Brake bias set at 54% in the front. DRS open, down start finish. 8th gear just before the line. Still accelerating hard. Remember, no ERS help, 315 clicks before we brake into Tamburello. So effectively at the moment, we are driving a conventional car with a turbocharged V6 engine. We're carrying that weight penalty, of course, of having all of those electronics and hybrid systems on board. So the car is not running very efficiently at this moment, but as you can see, it is still plenty fast. Initial impressions, with all the hybrid systems turned off, it feels very tractable, honestly. Little bit of propensity for rear locking under heavy braking. However, default setup feels neutral enough. It definitely feels like it could be a lot faster. However, it will be a lot faster once we turn on the hybrid system. So, we'll back off a bit here into the Rivazza complex. We'll go into balanced high. I'm going to set up a recovery rate of 70% on the MGUK. MGUH is going to go into motor mode. And now, we give it the beans. And immediately you can see that the acceleration really picks up. Look at that, we hit 315 clicks before. Now with the hybrid, we're up to 321. So that's pretty much bang on 200 miles an hour there. Power delivery is now completely different on the car. Definitely a lot more power available. That ERS nets about 160 horsepower when everything is running at full capacity, so you definitely feel it in the rear axle. And you can see, by the more scientific measurement of our delta, we're already down on our previous lap time by over 2 seconds. Down by over 3 seconds now. 3 1/4, 3.4, 3 1/2. DRS open, there's 4 seconds. 4.3. So there you go. Rather unscientific measurement. What's the ERS worth? It's worth about 4.3 seconds a lap. That's massive, absolutely massive. If you remember in 2009, when Formula One first introduced KERS, the first iteration of these energy recovery systems, some of the teams never ran it. The guys who won the championship that year, Braun, they never ran it. KERS at that time was not considered a big enough advantage in order for it to be essential equipment on the car. The championship winners, Braun, never really ran KERS. I think they trialed it at a couple of practice sessions, but they never developed it nearly to the point where they felt confident enough in putting it in a race. So, yeah, the championship winners in 2009 never ran it, and then nobody ran it in 2010, as it was optional equipment. However, in 2011, teams started to develop the technology more. They realized that it had that competitive advantage in terms of lap time, and most teams started to run KERS starting in 2011. There were still a couple stragglers at the back end of the field that never ran the system. I'm talking about Marussia, later Manor, and then of course HRT, Hispania, but most of the teams were running KERS starting in 2009. Starting in 2011, rather. Coming down the straight here, Remember, we're burning fuel all the time as well. Another 0.8 of a second. That was a 121.56. And still gaining time all the time. With the car now running as it's designed, with the hybrid systems running in conjunction with the internal combustion engine, through the turbocharger and all of that stuff, how's it feel? Well, default setup, everything feels very nicely balanced. I've got very good turn in, little bit of understeer mid-corner as you can see there, but traction is good. Initial turn in is very nice. The brakes feel balanced enough. I get my braking wrong there, that's my error. Even with the energy recovery rate at 70%, rear axle not really locking up. Maybe a little bit at the end of the hard braking zones, but for the most part, feeling pretty good. You can see the car is harvesting enough energy to sustain itself. I haven't touched the hybrid settings yet during this run, aside from turning the system on. And, well, everything seems pretty good. We'll go into battery mode now on the MGU-H, so you see we're going to gain a little bit of power toward the end of the straight as we start to get to VMAX here. And now you can see the system is charging. 29, 30, there you go. Running at full throttle, system charging in the straight line there with that MGU-H set to battery. Really cool. I have to say, these latest hybrid systems, they are such an improvement over what we had in 2014, 2015. The SF15T, trying to manage your electricity in that thing, it's a nightmare. It burns so much more than it can produce over the course of a given lap, and that's also true for this car. As you can see, we are now running a big deficit, but I haven't had to adjust that recovery rate yet, and we've still got 18, 19% remaining, and we're generating it all the time in the braking zone, so we're going to run out before the end of this lap, but really, how long was that? 5 laps? It's pretty good. Of course, we are running in the lowest deployable setting, but still. Traction feels good enough. If you get up on the curbing like I just did there, of course you're going to get wheel spin and then the associated oversteer. However, it's compliant. It's tractable. Feels very nice. Brakes feel very solid. With the harvesting going on the rear axle, you can push the brakes so hard, so deep into the braking zone. You're not going to lock them up. It's really, really good. Of course, you do have to employ the cadence braking techniques that you have to employ in any wing car. As the speed drops, the downforce, of course, is going to drop. And at lower speeds, with lower downforce, it's easier to lock up the wheels because braking power is constant unless you modulate it with your foot. But if you're experienced in more conventional open wheelers, no problem. Running out of power here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to up the harvest rate to 100% on the rear axle. I'm going to keep the MGU-H in the battery mode so we can at least charge a little bit on the straight line. And now, generate ever so slightly more power in the braking zones. DRS. And you can see our lap time, we're down by 3 seconds from our session best now because we have that power deficit. Now down by 0.6, so 0.6. You can see that the car is always going to use more power than it produces, and that's of course the nature of the beast. We have yet to achieve really high efficiency with these hybrid systems. However, it is getting there, and it is a huge improvement over the SF15T. What's also a huge improvement over the SF15T, it's the overall driving dynamics. This car has tons of downforce. It has, I'm going to say, just as much downforce, if not a little bit more, than the F2004, which of course also came to us in the 70th anniversary pack for Assetto Corsa. But this thing is fast. It's really fast, and it's grippy. The only reason why it's slower than the F2004, it's not because it has less power, it's got about the same horsepower, it's that it's hindered by the weight of that battery pack. It adds a lot of weight to these cars. It adds about 120 kilograms of weight relative to the F2004, so that's your weight penalty. So 122.61, obviously we are down on our session best, but that's about what we can expect running in this trim on default setup. That is not a shabby time by any means. Yeah, I think the car is theoretically capable of doing 119s on low fuel on the ultra soft tires for one lap, but for what we've got, I've got to say, very, very nice, very nice. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to balance the car out by reducing our recovery rate a little bit. I've turned the MGU-K into charging mode. I've put the MGU-H back in battery mode, and now we're going to charge the car. The way you charge the car, in addition to changing your settings on the hybrid system, is just by driving it a little bit more conservatively. You don't want to rev the engine all the way up anymore. In other words, you don't want to illuminate all of the blue lights on the right-hand side of the steering wheel. You just want to basically go on a more leisurely Sunday drive, if you will, with it. It's still going to harvest the vast majority of its power into the braking zones. However, it will harvest in a straight line, as long as you've got the MGU-H and battery. But you can see running at this slower pace, we are 6 seconds off of our session best now. We'll ramp our MGU-K recovery up to 100%. And the rest of the hybrid system is turned off, so we are only harvesting. Braking into Tosa. See, we snatched the rear axle a little bit. A little bit of oversteer there. I got on the throttle too soon. That's my fault. And now we're at 100%, so we can turn the system off. MGU-H goes back to motor. And now immediately, going from that 100% harvest rate to that 0%. Let's go back to 100. Let's brake. Right, everything is stable. Now into the Rivazza corners, let's go to 0 harvest. And you're going to notice that the braking distances are a bit longer. Yeah. So interesting, very, very interesting. However, we're going to go back into the pits, reset all of our switches. we're going to start a little bit of setup work on this car. Very, very cool so far, as you can see. However, now it's time to have a look at what's going on setup-wise in this thing. So we'll shut the engine down. You can see 55 liters is good for 27 laps, or about an hour and 22 minutes of run time. So that is unbelievably efficient. A full tank at the pace we've been running is good for about 3 hours and 18 minutes of running, or 67 laps. So yeah, look at that. That's the efficiency that these cars are producing now. Yeah, these are 1,000 horsepower Formula One race cars, but that's pretty good fuel economy if you ask me. However, now it's time to load my work-in-progress setup, and I emphasize work-in-progress because just like all of you over the last few days, I've been trying really hard to get my head wrapped around this car, and it's not easy. You can see here I haven't touched anything with the tires. I'm still running on the default super soft compound, 17 psi all across the board. However, some changes have been made to the aerodynamics, and I'm still this is where I'm struggling with the setup on this car, because I'm struggling a little bit with rear stability in high-speed corners. Just fighting me ever so slightly through the long high-speed corners, and, well, my instinct is to add more rear wing. But what that does is then it changes the overall aero balance of the car relative to the front and rear. If you add too much rear wing, it pays you a penalty in two ways. One, you're going to get more drag, obviously, so you're going to be slower in a straight line. But secondly, if your aero balance is too heavy toward the rear, it's going to give you understeer in high-speed corners, but it can, rather counterintuitively, it also changes the overall attitude of the car in pitch. So if you're running rake, in other words, if you want the nose to be lower to get that weight over the front axle, as your speed increases, you're actually going to be running some negative rake. In other words, the car is going to go into a nose-up attitude, and that's going to make it unstable and crazily unstable at high speed as you're approaching those high-speed corners. So it's actually becoming a bit more of a sustainable idea to have a little bit of a front-heavy aero balance, because I'm running a lot of positive rake on the car. I want that nose to be sitting low so that I get that weight over the front axle and helps my turn in. So if I actually reduce the angle of the rear wing a bit and sort of leave the front wing a little bit more intensely pitched, in other words, generating more theoretical downforce with the front end than I am with the rear, it tends to balance out at speed. So I'm actually going to remove a little bit of that rear wing. Alignment, I haven't done anything with the suspension as of yet. Negative cambers on the rear and the front, which is about what you'd want here. I'm thinking a little bit more negative camber. Let's go to 2.2 is something that I want to do. The dampers, the car feels good, actually, in all of its moments of loading and bound, rebound, compression and heave, all of that. It feels good. Brake bias, this doesn't matter because you're adjusting it anyway when you're really going for it. Heave dampers, your third spring, again, the car feels good in heave. Travel ranges all feel good. I'm not bottoming out, and I'm not bottoming the suspension either. And then anti-roll bars. Generally speaking, you want the anti-roll bar to be tight. In other words, you want it to be hard because that's going to give you better response from the front end at the potential risk of overwhelming the tires. So leaving it where it is so far feels good. The overall hardness, though, of the suspension does feel ever so slightly too soft. So in other words, I may want a little bit more resistance there on the front axle in terms of that compression ratio, because the travel range is good, but the rate at which it travels seems a little bit too fast. So perhaps a little bit more damping on the bump and fast bump there. Otherwise, the attitude of the car through the corners feels stable enough. It's just, again, that rear downforce, that rear end stability that I am struggling with a little bit. So that's where I'm at for the moment. You can see that we are running a significant amount of rake in the car. So our front ride height is 40 millimeters and our rear ride height is 102. So there you go. There's your rake rate. Anyway, let's put some fuel in this thing. Let's run the 55 liters rather, that we started with on the default setup, and we'll head back out. So hybrid system in charging. Our recovery rate on the rear axle is going to be 0 to start. MGUH to battery. And let's go. We are plus 311.2 on our delta. Of course, we've been stopped in the pit lane, so we can disregard those figures. Also, you're probably, by this point, wondering why perhaps I'm not being as colorful with the commentary here. It's because really, this car is it's such a studious thing, because you really have to be in tune with the changes that you're making to all the electronic systems. You've got to be in tune with the changes that you're making with the harvest on the rear axle relative to your brake bias, of course, and it's really is an academic exercise for the most part. In terms of driving the car, I'm not as much commenting on that because I think it's plainly obvious to see the attitude of the car and its reactions to my inputs here. I mean, I've already done several videos in it. You've seen what the car can do, at least as far as I've been able to work it, and it's good. It's a good car. I don't think we need to say more than that. I want to show you how you interface with it in this video. So that's what I'm doing. That's why I'm being very methodical. I'm even speaking a little bit more slowly because, yeah, I want to show you just how you have to start thinking about this. Let's go to 100%. Recovery. We'll ramp that down, of course. There's our brake bias at 100%. Feels good. All right. Brake bias at 56 to the front. GUH to motor. Now, through the Rivazza corners, let's go into hot lap on the MGUK. This is full beans now. Going on the manual curves deploy, you can see the green light next to the K1 button on the steering wheel between K1 and P. Yep, that's illuminated. There's our full speed, 335, 337. Now hard on the brakes. Yes. Full beans. And you can see the delta is now negative. Bit of a mistake there through the Villeneuve chicane, no problem. And you can see the deploy rate there, both for this lap and overall. That ticker is going down. Interestingly, slow in Sector 2. And we completely mess up the braking there. Yep, that was always going to happen. All right. No biggie. Let's use the rest of this lap to harvest some energy. And we're back up to 100%. MGUH to motor, hot lap. VRS, let's try that again. There's that high-speed rear instability rearing its ugly head again. Have not gotten my head around that. Now running in the hot lap mode on the MGUK deploy. Throttle response. Watch my throttle trace very closely here. Engine doesn't really start to pick up revs again until you're about 50% throttle, maybe even 60%. It's trying to harvest energy all the time, even at lower revs. And you can see it really impacts me coming up the hill there out of Acqua Minerale. It's really a hindrance at lower revs. Now you can see here we're starting to run out of power here for this lap. And yeah, try as I might, we're not going to best our session best yet. So that's the hot lap mode. Perhaps that's not what we need here. Maybe balanced tie is the way to go. And then just some squirts of the manual Kurs deploy. There's the bog down. See what I mean? It's very slow to respond there on the throttle at lower revs and at lower speeds. I don't know if that's the nature of the beast, I don't know if that's a bug, I don't know what that is, but you do notice it and you do have to drive around it. I do have to say though, great sounds on those upshifts. I love the little pops that you get on the upshift. Sounds really dramatic from the external views too. That is session best, matched almost exactly. A little bit of that high-speed instability, but we're up by almost 4/10 in Sector 1. In the rev range, there we go. Gaining time all the time here. That's Sector 1 done. That manual Kurs deploy a lot, overshot Marianne slightly. Didn't lose all that much time, all things considered. Half a second up. See, our power usage relative to power generation, exactly where we want. We're running out of power right at the end of the lap. New session best, 120.9. Again, that green bar on top is telling us how much power remains for this lap. Bar on the bottom telling us how much power is remaining in the car. Tires are starting to go off a bit. We've knocked the new out of them here with these flying laps, but still consistent enough within half a second. We gained a little bit of time here. Yep. remaining 40.6 liters. 121.34. There's some oversteer. Back out a bit. Let's go to balance low. Let's put our MGUH into battery mode. We won't use the manual KERS anymore. Manual KERS, by the way, you get on the button and it just gives you full beans the instant you hit the button. So it completely forgets its traction logic there, and it just gives you power, so don't get on the button until you know that you can handle it. And you see, just changing the hybrid mode, I didn't turn the system off, I didn't change the harvest rate, but just changing it from balance high to balance low, we're down by 1.2 seconds. That's a very oversteering moment. Somehow held on to it, no problem. Back at the balanced high. Revs up. Very aggressive there through Acqua Minerale, no problem, got away with it. Quite aggressive into Variante Alta as well. Botched the exit. You are able to run reasonably consistent lap times, though. This is going to be within 3/10. Yeah, cool. Quite nice, quite nice. Go back into charge mode. 100% harvest on the rear. MGUH back to battery. Was in battery the whole time. So quite definitely, you can see how this car just sucks you into wanting to do lap after lap after lap after lap after lap, because there are so many variables that are directly under your influence. It's not just, okay, go into the pits, make a change, go do a couple of laps, see how the car reacts, go back into the pits, make another change, see how the car reacts. No, it's everything is under your direct influence from the steering wheel. You've really got to have buttons available to drive this car. I'm using the Thrustmaster Ferrari F1 wheel, the F150 rim, and it's got plenty of buttons. I'm using all of them. You need it. You really need them on this car because you've got so many things to play with. If you don't have all those buttons on the wheel, it really becomes cumbersome to drive these cars because you're adjusting things constantly when you're in a race situation. Maybe you need speed for one lap. Maybe you need a little bit of energy conservation for the next lap. Maybe your tires are going off on the rear. You got to change your brake bias, all that kind of stuff. Maybe you don't want the harvest rate that you want. There's so many things that you have to be considerate of when you're driving this car. You need the equipment from your wheel setup to be able to deal with all of it. Because if you're trying to adjust brake bias or your harvest rates or whatever with the keyboard, that's a really big distraction. You really need to have a wheel or a button box or something that's going to be pretty much at fingertip length because you're dealing with it constantly. Last thing we're going to do here is we're going to go back into the pits. We're going to take pretty much all the fuel out. We're going to put it on the Ultra Soft, so we're going to do a couple of quali sim laps here and see what we can do in terms of besting that lap time. So, settings, where we want it to be. Charge mode, good. MGUH, to battery to start with. Harvest rate, 100%. And brake bias at 56. Cool, cool. Let's head back into the garage. We'll take most of the fuel out. Just going to have enough for an out lap, a couple of flying laps, and an in lap. We'll do the Ultra Soft tires. I want... let's bring the rear pressures down by a click each. And back into the cockpit with us. Okie dokes. Alright, so we'll not use any hybrid power on this outlap. Try and get the tires and brakes up to temperature. Tires, of course, have been sitting in the blankets, so they're already pretty much set to go. They are the Ultra Softs, though, so we don't want to be too aggressive on the outlap. They are effectively qualifiers, but we have seen from these Pirelli tires that they are quite durable. They can, I would say theoretically, on most circuits, they could probably do an entire race distance if they were allowed to per the regulations. And there's our fuel light at 10 liters. Just a very deliberate warm-up lap here. We get everything set. MGUH to motor. Recovery rate. Ramp it down to 50%. And hot lap for MGUK. Off we go. Manual Kurs. Got good grip from the Ultra Softs here. Look at that, up by 3/10 in the first half of Sector 1. Lost a lot of time there, got a little bit over-exuberant on the throttle. However, we were able to claw all of it back in one corner. Go for a bit more recovery. Made a right mess of Sector 2. Let's charge up the bats here. Give one more go at it. You can see, though, if you make a mistake, you've really just got to abort the lap and charge your batteries. Rear locking there, just trying to control it. Keep the revs up. There we go. Now I'm going to have to transition into balanced high, otherwise we're going to run out of power down the start-finish straight before we get to the line. So balanced high. Here we go on the power. Run out of electricity here. Out of power. But we've done it. 119.94. I said we're theoretically capable of a 119. There it is. Made good on my prediction. Chalk it up to experience and just awesome driving skill, I would say. No, chalk it up to luck. I've not recorded the hot laps yet for this video, so I honestly didn't know what the ultimate pace could be, at least in this setup. So, yeah, there it is. 119. Cool. GUH back to battery. Very, very cool. Gotta say, the overall verdict on the SF70H, it's good. It's really good. It's the kind of car that just sucks you in, and it never spits you out again. It's almost the only car that I have driven since last Tuesday when we got it, and yeah, that's including the F2004 in this pack. It's just the amount of immersion, the amount of technicality in this thing. It is something that we haven't really seen before. Yes, the SF15T and yes, Formula Hybrid have been here for a while, but this one, it looks the part, it acts the part. The SF15T, I'm sorry, it's an absolute abomination of a race car. It's awful. Formula Hybrid, it's a glorious machine, but I think the aspect of it being fictional detracts from the feelings that you get when you play it. Formula Hybrid, as we've demonstrated, is slightly faster than this car on aggregate, but this thing, it's a 2017 Works Ferrari, and here it is in 2017, and we're driving it in Assetto Corsa. That's something we've never seen before. It's certainly something I've never seen before, and I am just absolutely chuffed to bits at the opportunity that we've all got here now in sim racing in 2017. There it is. That's the Works Ferrari. And we just drove it for an hour. It's absolutely spectacularly good for what it is as a race car, for how it handles, for how it behaves, for how you interface with it, and also for the fact that it's a Works Ferrari, and it's this year's Works Ferrari. It's so absolutely monstrously cool. However, that concludes our commentated portion of our review today. Hopefully you've gained some insight in terms of how this car actually works. I'm still learning it myself. You now know everything that I currently know. Hopefully I'll be learning a bit more, and hopefully all of you already have learned a bit more, or you will be learning a bit more. But yeah, let's turn the comment section into a discussion about how to drive this thing, and how to drive this thing well, because I'm still learning, much like all of you are still learning. I've talked to quite a few of you about the handling dynamics of this car already. I've talked to you about how to use the hybrid systems. Yeah, all of it's true. All of it represents the best of my knowledge up to this point, and all of this video represents the best of my knowledge up to this point. And really, this is an unknown to the entire world, except for people who work for the Ferrari Formula 1 team, because, yeah, it's that top secret still, because, yeah, it is the current Formula 1 cars, which, yeah, it's just insanely cool. However, as always with these reviews, hot laps from Imola here without commentary, external as well as onboard views are to come, so please stay tuned for those. I know that it took a little while to get this review out. I'm busy. I'm real busy. Sorry. It's just how my life works, but yeah, I, just like all of you, really wanted to get this review out, and now I have. So, sorry for the delay. However, it's just how it shakes out. Life is hard. Yep. However, of course, thank you, all of you, for your continued support. for your continued engagement. The channel still has some great momentum behind it, well past now that 3,000 subscriber milestone. So thank you all very, very much for your excitement, your support, your engagement, your comments, your likes, your shares, your suggestions, and even your criticisms. So cool. Stay tuned for the hot laps, everyone. Ferrari Man 601 saying thank you very much for watching, and of course, we will see you soon.